Namaste. In the series of videos elucidating the seminal works of Karpatriji, today I am going to talk about some of his works concerning the current politics as well as his philosophical ideas about how an ideal political system should be. In one of his seminal works called as the Marxwad and Ramraj, which is published by Gita Press Gorakhpur, elucidates or tells in detail what are the ideas that should be incorporated for the well-being of an entire society. I would go through some of his uh, ideas that he has talked about, and as much as he was an authority on Vedas and Vedic Sahitya, he was also a profound political thinker. His book, which I have already talked about, Ramraj and Marxwad, is a comprehensive comparative study on Bharatiya and Western philosophy. While I've used the word philosophy for both Bharatiya Darshan and Western philosophy, Swamiji clearly expounded the fundamental difference between the two. He named different Bharatiya Darshan as Ramraj, that's how he clubbed them together, and gave a generic term Marxwad for all the Western philosophies. Then Swamiji went on to deal with all different aspects of Western philosophies and showed that those ideas were basically emotional reactions to the set of events that happened at that particular point. And thus, they happen to lack universality and stand in stark contrast to Bharatiya Chintan, which is described as darshan. And we know that darshan is basically an experience free from rag and dvesha. Thereby, it doesn't have any constraints in its applicability. While the former is an experience entirely at the physical level, Bharatiya Darshan is beyond the Panchabhutas. So essentially, by design, both stand to be separate. And it is not wise to say Indian philosophy or rather Paschimi Darshan. So both are contradictory terms. Then Swamiji also takes up individual points of Greek philosophers, like ancient philosophers like Hegel, yeah, and then goes on to talk about German philosopher like Hegel, Marx, and goes on to provide a counter. Then he analyzes the impact of this philosophy on the political ideology established in the West. So then he does a time-wise analysis of ancient Greek ideas, including that of Plato and Aristotle, the medieval ones like Aristotle, and the modern ideas of nationalism that made different nations like that of Germany and France. And then and those ideas actually included that of Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and Rousseau. While the rise of anarchism in certain parts of the world is actually worrying, and he, in order to counter its acceptance, he refers to the Shanti Parva of Mahabharata to show that anarchy or arajakta, that's how we call it, is considered as a biggest papa, and the Hobbes idea of Matsyanaya has been discussed in Mahabharata and shown to be inapplicable in the real sense. And whenever those ideas did exist, a moral code was created to fight this tendency, right? However, even in this case, the king or the noble person has not been given complete rights, so that if he rules without any discipline, he can be removed. Hope said that he can only be removed, while in Mahabharata, the kings not only have been removed, but they have been completely destroyed. While some people say that this theory of fish is a state of nature, Swamiji disputes the fact and says that when people are dharmanishta, as in Sati Yoga, or when people are close to Karana, the logic of fish doesn't hold. Actually, it then appears as a Vikriti when people move away from Karana, and this logic of fish becomes dominant, and therefore it is not the state of nature. While the West insists on animal nature of human beings, Bharatiya Darshan always insists on Samanvaya and proximity to Brahma as the natural state. In this context, Swamiji evaluates the idea of individualism, utilitarianism, individual freedom, monotheism, idealism, democratic state, the ideas of Immanuel Kant, John Fichte, Hegel, Bourdieu, Green, and Bradley. Then he evaluates Marxism and talks about Marx and related concepts of anarchy, fascism, populism, majoritarianism, communism, and collectivism. After discussing these ideas, Swamiji also evaluates the different theories and compares them to Indian outlook. He dismisses the Darwin's theory of evolution of natural selection and explains different organisms, their birth and their crossbreeds, and and what is the position of Manushas in this entire animal kingdom. He establishes that Aryas, the Bhartiyas, were born in Himalayas and were not actually had evolved from any organism but as individual beings. He also demolishes the Aryan migration theory by dismissing the movement from the Central Asia. Then he takes the argument to linguistics as communication as then he takes this idea to linguistics and establishes that communication is critical to any organism, and goes on to say that Sanskrit is the oldest language in consonance with the ideas of human birth in Bharatvarsha. The theories in communism have rootings in conflict among different sections of the society or organisms. Swamiji shows that again, it is departure from natural states, and conflicts are not the natural tendency of individuals. Karpatriji's active interest in politics has been very evident by his participation in different acts, different movements, which were relevant at his time. Interesting thing is that he's the only philosopher who looked at politics in a very holistic manner and reiterated that it is a means to facilitate the highest attainment prescribed by dharma and clear the obstacles of those who are yearning for it. He, in his philosophy, he considers the entire world as children of Paramatma, and under this premise, brotherhood, that is bhratrata, atmiyata, which is congeniality, and then he talks about spirituality as a natural consequence of this kind of idea. Then he insists that having laws based on our dharma shastras and council constituted of scholars who are well versed in these texts will go a long way in in resolving conflicts among different society, and also to gain a better stand on understanding our nature as well as our society. Now, he also established a very interesting relationship between dharma and niti. He explains that the advancement of an individual sets in the context of dharma and is attained via the path of niti. So the context itself is dharma and the rest is niti. So he goes on to say that any kind of advancement obtained without dharma is detrimental, because we see in today's world that any material achievement by any of the member of the society, if not rooted in the dharma, will lead to conflict and have dire consequences. Now, the state, and what is the duty of state? So he says that the state should pave the way for our adhyatmic, dharmic, and Sanskritic independence. That is, we should be able to allow pious people and dharmanist populace to pursue their purusharthas in a congenial manner. This piousness is indispensable. This ends excessive competition and paves the way for harmony. Then he called the state to be bound by dharma and be non-discriminatory. And the definition of dharma-bound state is that the politics, economics, and other social systems must be defined in accordance to dharma, as well as they should be implemented. He believes that the state should not only be active in execution and not the modification or deletion or correction of those ideas. Then Swamiji goes on to say that the dharma bound state does not imply that a specific dharma should rule and others be always kept aloof of that system, but instead he talked about how the state should facilitate those who are willing to subscribe the idea of dharma and should make efforts to pave the way to achieve their goals. Then the very relevant idea of liberating our temples, Swamiji at his period also said that the mathas, the gurukuls, and the dharmic institutions must be governed by the sampradayas themselves, and the state must not intervene uh, in their administration. The rules should be followed in letter and spirit, and the fundamental idea was to advocate the independence of temples. Swamiji had a very favorable opinion of democracy as well. So he said that that democracy is an excellent means of achieving the Ram Rajya, and it is a place where one person was considered important by the king. In fact, in Ram Rajya, even the opinion of one single individual was taken into consideration and given a rightful uh, thought, as well as the following actions were executed in the light of dharma. And in an ideal democracy, which Swamiji envisions, uh, this democracy should be from the people, by the people, and for the people. And the people have to be very cautious in executing their rights. And the second aspect is that in order to ensure the success of the system, the election should be cheap and any person should be able to contest. In the modern context, Swamiji suggested that the key ingredients of successful democracy which should be satisfied is that the voters and contestants should have minimum qualifications on dharma, and he delved upon the meaning of independence and insisted that the adhyatmic development is that the independence of adhyatmic development is the key for independence, right? And then he lists that the integrity of nation, the astha of the ruler in Ishvara, his dharmanishtha, the stability of government, the functioning of gram panchayats as per parampara, the control of goods, and the qualities of the leaders should include magnanimity, intellect, integrity, and these together comprise the dharmic system where we all are able to pursue our goals. He says that in the end, he says that the saints and the intellectual people of the society should keep an eye on the actions of the government. In the next video, we'll talk about some of the political interventions by Swami Karpatriji.